So here we go, guys. The next few set of movies aren't exactly the best. Yeah, it's a long stream of decent to bad movies, but for some reason, we're going to start with one of the worst. Blade Trinity, better known as the one that almost no one really cared about, and it's obvious in it. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We have to go over the plot first. After a group of vampires discover the tomb of Dracula, in their efforts to prevent Blade from further interference, actually frame him for murder. Which is honestly a pretty good idea. If you know a guy who hunts you to death, just frame him for murder. Get him stuck in the prison system. It'll literally be that simple. But, this is the first, only decent idea in this whole dumb movie, so plus one out of about 1,000. After the cops break into the base and try to arrest him, also killing Whistler because he's alive again. Seriously, this guy seems to be a freaking Highlander because he's either dead or alive no matter what you do. Basically, demoralized after Whistler's second or third death by this point, Blade decides to turn himself in order to get arrested and give up. While he's on his way to prison, a group of young vampire hunters calling themselves the Night Stalkers, which I will admit is a pretty clever reference to a supernatural superhero team in the Marvel Universe, which isn't really talked about. On top of that, it sounds really close to Darkstalkers, which is a really good Capcom fighting game. Wish I could talk about Darkstalkers right now and not this movie. Anyway, basically they rescue him, and then he learns what's going on with the vampires and Dracula. So basically the vampires want to use Dracula or Drake to get rid of their own weaknesses to sunlight, and the Night Stalkers want to stop them. They've also created this bioweapon to eliminate all the vampires, or at least the ones that are connected to the plot in this case, and eat the blood of a pure vampire, Drake, in order to just use it. This leads to a whole big battle where Blade kills Drake, uses the weapon to eliminate all the vampires that important to the plot. However, Drake states that Blade will eventually give in to his vampiric urges, kill someone, and does create more vampires. He, for some reason, I guess out of spite for Blade, sort of like, you can't stop this, so I'm going to make it easier on you. He shapeshifts his corpse into Blade's body so the cops can take it back, believing that Blade is dead so he can go on to hunt more vampires. The end. So yeah, this movie is awful. The action, which was really the best part of the last movies, is pretty dull, with one character having this weird thing where she plugs earbuds into her ear when she starts fighting. Yeah, it does give a reason for why we're hearing a pretty decent music in the middle of fights, but at the same time, it's pretty dumb considering the fact that you're in the middle of a fight and you kind of need all of your senses, especially if people are constantly trying to sneak up on you in the middle of said fight. Also, she's apparently Whistler's daughter, but that never really goes anywhere outside of a reference or having a Whistler in here who's gonna probably die later. Also, in this movie, it's pretty obvious Wesley Snipes does not care at all by this point. It's a well-known fact that he was incredibly difficult to work with during this film, as he was unhappy with the script and the director, but was kind of forced to keep up with it due to contracts and the like. Hell, in a few scenes, it's not even him, it's his stand-in or computer effect there to replace him. So, yeah, when the main actor who doesn't give a crap, your plot sucks, and most of the other characters are uninteresting, you kind of end up creating a pretty dumb movie. But let's get away from all the behind the scenes stuff and focus on what's on the actual screen. As I stated before, it's a pretty dull looking movie, and Blade is not really much of the focus similar in the last movie. It feels like the Night Stalkers are the more important players here, as they're the ones that are given a lot more focus, even though they do drop like flies towards the middle of the movie. The ones that survive are still given decent characterization over Blade himself. I guess you could argue that yes, by this point we don't really need to know more about Blade, but you'd think that he'd be suffering a bit more from Whistler's death again, or is he just so dull, or is he just numb to the fact that Whistler keeps dying? Anyway, yet again, the Night Stalkers are the ones that know the truth about Dracula. Blade doesn't even go on the quest to discover this himself. They save Blade from the cops, and they're practically responsible for the overall win with their whole vampire bioweapon thing, which they develop mostly off screen until they need the part from Dracula. It just feels like they did more in the movie than Blade did. Again, Wesley Snipes did not care, so it kind of makes sense that they would do more in the movie than he does. Honestly, I haven't. This might have been a backdoor pilot. I did hear some rumors that this might have been a backdoor pilot for a Night Stalkers TV series or a Night Stalkers movie. But, this doesn't really work. In fact, this movie is called Blade, and he should probably be the main presence in the movie. I know there have been cases where some character who's popular in a spin-off, who gets their own who's popular in a TV show or movie, gets their own spin-off, and it ends up being just as good as the original. It happens very rarely. I mean, for one thing, look at Joey, Planet Sheen, and stuff like that. Hell, the Cleveland Show. But it does happen. But it doesn't really work in this case, the fact that you're giving your main character the shaft, more focus on these completely new characters. In those cases, the characters that were given their spin-offs have been around for quite a while enough that we get a bit about their character. So, was there any good thing to come out of all this mess? No, no, not really. It's pretty much an entire dumpster fire. Outside of being a fascinating case of what happens when your lead actor doesn't really even care about a paycheck, overall, I have to say it's really not worth the sit to watch. I will say this, though, in hopes for Blade's future. There are currently rumors going around that Marvel is planning some form of revival for Blade, and whether that be on the big screen instead of the movie, which would be a pretty cool thing in the Marvel Universe to have actual monsters in it, or a small screen Netflix TV show, or hell, something on ABC, it still seems pretty interesting. Hell, even Wesley Snipes said he would want to return to the role, although by this point I'd honestly like to see him as a more Whistler figure. Honestly, this could go either way, good or bad, and only time will tell if this thing can ultimately be, the entire Blade concept can be risen from the ashes. When was the last time I actually had a Blade comic now that I think about it? Well, everyone, I'll see you in the next movie.